Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 28. We're going to be joining you every week to talk IT career, news, and opinions based on our points of view. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
It's going great, John. I've consumed large amounts of coffee as usual to do the podcast. And I want to make sure our listeners know that we are a couple VMware solution engineers looking to bring them the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. We hope our career discussions will be relevant across disciplines and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Great, Nick. Hey, how's your week been? I know you were under the weather a bit.
You know, I feel more human every day, and my mind seems to work a little bit better. I'm definitely getting over it. Hopefully, at some point in the next several days, I'll be able to go back to my exercise class and get back to working out. At the moment, I'm just losing muscle mass by the minute.
Oof. That's it's always rough to lose hard-earned fitness. I know exactly what that feels like.
But you know, the opposite of fitness is what happens on Valentine's Day when people eat a lot of chocolate and such. That's kind of close to the time I got sick. How was Valentine's Day for you? Did you do anything special for that special someone in your life?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's the short answer. We did get each other gifts. It didn't have anything to do with chocolate or flowers. My wife got me a Soda Stream, because I've been trying to get off of Diet Dr. Pepper and into just like lightly flavored waters. So I was buying a couple cases of flavored seltzer from Costco and a couple of cases from the local grocery store. And she was like, well, if you're going to do that, why don't we get the Soda Stream? And it's been amazing. So this is the John White endorsement for the Soda Stream. And let me see, what did I get? Oh, yes, the sugar-free peach syrup from Torani. So
Nice. I look forward to reading the review on Amazon. Do you want to put the link to that in the show notes as well?
Absolutely. I'll give you a preview right now. Normally when I drink soda water, it's really just for my thirst and to get a little bit of sweetness. But this flavored seltzer water actually grew me 3 inches taller. So I can't maintain that on the fly. I probably need to take an improv comedy class or something. But there's an entire genre of ridiculous Amazon reviews where, let me see, is like 3 Howling Wolves t-shirt. I think that's the classic one, right?
I'm pretty sure that you would be good to go on any topic for 5 to 10 minutes. Somebody out there, tweet a random topic to @NerdJourney. We'll get John to just talk about it. I'll throw it at him out of the blue. Do it on the air. Do it live. I think we had topics, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Let's ride the Soda Stream into the topics, huh?
I do want to mention that I got my wife a really shaggy blanket because it's super cold here in the Bay Area in January, February. She loved it, and apparently she still loves me. So I'm very happy about that. But you're right. Topics. The topic this week is asking for more money. There's 2 different scenarios that we're going to be talking about: asking for a raise, and then secondly, asking for more money when you're negotiating a new hire situation. So you're about to be hired, they're making you an offer, and you actually want more money than what they're offering. So with that in mind, let's dive into it. Situation 1, asking for a raise. We, in preparation for this, read this article from, shocker of shockers, the career blog at Washington Post. So this automatically is a career clickbait episode. So one of the things, references that we used was Washington Post jobs, 4 tips for snagging more than a cost of raised living. Nope. Nope, that's not it. 4 tips for snagging more than a cost of living raise. Yeah, that sounds right.
I don't know
All
what a
right.
cost of raised living is, but it sounds fun.
Yeah, that's staying in. We're not editing that out. So they offer a number of, uh, of pieces of advice. We're not going to, read the article out to you, but I wanted to give the highlights, right? So four main pieces of advice: stand up and stand out, be assertive, back up your claims, and prepare answers to possible questions. So mostly we wanted to, react, because that's the genre of podcast we are now, is just reactions. Didn't realize that was a genre. I know that's a YouTube genre, but not a podcast genre. It is now. Reacting to career clickbait. Stand up and stand out, right? So that's volunteering for extra work, is taking on leadership positions, and being visible. And my reaction immediately was yes. Like, unfortunately, when you want more money, generally what you have to do is do more work. There's no, hey, I'm just doing my job really, really well, and because of that, I deserve more money. It's like you got to take on additional responsibilities, and people don't really think about that. You're doing the job for what you get paid now. Why do we give you more money? Except in like a general like competition thing, right? Oh, I could do this job somewhere else for more money. Okay, well, maybe. But that's not a good reason for you to get more money here, right? So in general, what you want to do is do what that next level pay band in the organization does, right? So if you are, level X, what is level X plus one supposed to do? Are they supposed to be more senior? Are they supposed to have more expertise? Are they supposed to lead more, um, influence within the company? Whatever that is, start doing that. Start taking that on, and as a result, you can articulate later on that yes, this next band and this next level of responsibility, I'm already doing that. So that means I deserve the money, right? I don't know if that makes sense to you. Hopefully that makes sense.
It
Um,
definitely does, but I thought of a question here, John. Is there
sure.
a good way for me to ask my manager, whether during the interview process or beyond, about whether these pay bands even exist at the company I'm going to? Because it doesn't sound like a lot of companies might have that. That's just my opinion.
Oh yeah, right. So I think that's an important thing that we can, think about while we're interviewing. Like, is there a career path within the organization beyond just this job? And maybe it's just the job title, right? Is there a senior version, super senior, ultra senior, mega senior, whatever that progression is, that they have defined, and do they have additional um, descriptions for that job, or areas of expertise or responsibility, or additional things that each of those more senior versions of that job title are supposed to take on. And as a result, you have a map of where you're moving towards, even if you don't necessarily qualify for whatever reason for that next senior title. Maybe what you're doing is moving towards that, and so at the very least you qualify for more money within the title band that you currently are in. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you.
Cool. One of the things I really wanted to note was that you have to balance taking on additional job responsibilities against being exploited, right? Like what you, and maybe that's like an extreme word to use in that situation, but you don't want to do more work and have that be the baseline for your expectations, right? So if you spend, 9 months of the year working at what your perception of what that next level of job responsibility is, and then you get a cost of living raise or even nothing, then you're going to feel resentful, So you need to make sure, a couple things. The work, the additional stuff that you're taking on, it has to matter to your management team, right? So it has to be something that's important to your immediate manager. And then maybe you need to figure out if it matters to your manager's manager, right? So that entire chain of management, because, when your manager says, hey, Joe deserves more money, then I can actually really offer. I need to go to my director and justify that, or raises above a certain amount need to get approved on that management chain. So you need to have the additional things that you're taking on matter up that chain. I hope that makes sense.
It definitely does, and I think to that point, you have to have some understanding of how the managers think and frame success for the organization and themselves, how to speak their language, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the type of thing that you need to have like an open dialogue with your management team about, right? So you have to be open about what your aspirations are. Listen, I really like doing my job. I want to do really well at it. I want to do more. My aspiration is to be, even better at it, more valuable to the company, and as a result, probably more highly compensated. Here's kind of the roadmap that I had envisioned, but I want to take on additional responsibilities as long as it doesn't compromise, my core job function. But when I take on additional things, I need to understand like what's actually important to you, what's going to make your life as the manager of the team easier, what's going to be most impactful to you, and just open up that dialogue. I think one of the things that's usually pretty important is to have measurable accomplishments. So either you do something that has like a very specific impact, like productivity impact, a quality of service impact, risk lowering impact, revenue increasing impact, some measure of that accomplishment. So you can say, on a monthly basis, hey, I'm doing this project that you assigned me, on top of my base responsibilities. Here's what the impact is. So far, here's where we are in the process. So you just kind of roll that forward, and have that be part of your ongoing career discussion with your manager. So yeah, like that measurability. And then I think the thing that I touched on there is soliciting feedback on tracking towards that review and raise period, right? These are the projects I'm on. I've already told you, my aspiration is to, take the next step forward in seniority. What's your feeling about the things that I'm doing to track towards that in our next review period? So that's kind of my reaction to that stand up and stand out, is to not just to have it be, hey, just take on stuff. Like I have a very specific reason that I'm mentioning that, and that's that I kind of took on responsibility and tasks at a previous job, and then when I, maybe like a year later, when I was talking to a manager about taking the next step forward to get a bump in seniority, like his vision of what I was doing was not impacted by that additional responsibility and tasks that I was taking on at all, right? So I've been doing it, very religiously, for like weekly, bi-weekly. It made him look and feel bad if I didn't do it correctly, right? But he didn't view it as important to taking a step forward in seniority. So I'd taken on this additional stuff and it had no positive impact. So it's very important for you to make sure that you're aligned with the things that you're taking on, right? If it's not going to help you, then it's just extra work. Maybe it's nice to do that to help people and help out the team, but if it's only downside, right? If you mess it up, and you can get viewed as not doing your job by not doing it correctly, then that's not good. There's no upside, only downside.
Sure. And it seems like when you're adding responsibility, yes, we can automate tasks and things like that. But in my mind, no matter how you slice it, the more responsibility you add, I think you're adding time commitment to. And I think that's the negative downside that people see when they hear the term, oh, I have to take on more responsibility to get this, and then maybe they don't want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, that's totally legitimate, right? I don't want to do more. Um, but then you have to question, if you are asking for more money than just cost of living increase in my area, why? Is it you're doing your job and you're doing it well? Well, that is what your base pay is for, right? Not for, and if you're asking for more money, it can't be for, well, I'm doing my job really well. You have to be asking for more money because you've been doing more than your job really well.
Right.
So
The path from good to great actually takes more work than people think.
yeah, absolutely. And more money is part of that, right? So um I think that taking on more responsibility is daunting, so think about that when you're thinking about what you want. I should point out another part of this is that it takes planning. You can't do this, 2 weeks before the review period starts. You have to do this a year before the review period starts, 9 months before. It needs to be part of an ongoing conversation that you're having with your management team and something that they're aware of, right? So um, I just wanted to point that out. It's not something, this is not a tactic that you use in your negotiation for more money, for asking for a raise. This is part of a strategic vision that you have for your career that starts well before you have that review period and raise period. So hopefully that makes sense. Second point was to be assertive. I think their point here in the article was, some managers will only give higher raises when it's asked for. Like, my view on that is, well, okay, so in our one-on-ones, we're going to have, um, you know, open and candid discussions about what it is that we want. This is kind of my hope over my medium-term version of this career. I want to have, more responsibility. I want to, take, achieve higher titles. I want to increase my compensation. Like all of that needs to, is I think totally legitimate to be out in the open. It doesn't need to be every week you're talking about how that you want more money. It just needs to be like a candid part of your goal setting for the year and something you revisit. I don't know, once a month. So when it says like some managers will only give higher raises when it's asked for, like that's kind of not good in my mind. Like, if somebody deserves the raise, they've been communicating, they've done everything except ask for it. Like it doesn't make sense to not give them money when they're, clearly deserving. So I don't know that this is like a huge big point, but I think that, it might be a sign of an unhealthy management culture if the manager tries to get away with giving you the minimum that you deserve, and you have to do everything, including asking for more money, in order to get it. Doesn't make sense to me, but there it is. Third point: back up your claims. Right. So this is really important. We already talked about doing measurable things, so you need to document it over time. Um, you have this measurable goal, a project that you're trying to accomplish, something that needs to be delivered, a presentation that needs to be done to a specific group, whatever it is, make it measurable and then make sure that your performance on that measurable thing is tracked and documented. And so you report back, again, in the feedback, in your weekly one-on-one, again, it doesn't need to be every single week. Hey, you assigned me that thing, I did it. Hey, you assigned me that thing, I did it. It's, kind of a monthly check-in. Hey, I know that, we were talking about my goal of, achieving, senior IT poobah, or whatever the title is. By my estimation, the additional projects that I took on were this, this, and this. We brought this in here, we brought this in here. We achieved this with this. Is that, if I'm documented, would that be a reasonable thing to document for our later discussion during review period, and get their feedback there? So, back up your claims. And I'm not talking about just in that discussion or in that review discussion. It always makes sense to have everything that you do kind of documented, like much, much earlier on. Weekly one-on-ones, maybe monthly in those weekly meetings, instead of in every single one of those meetings. But then when you go, if there's like a formal review meeting or whatever, process your organization uses, it should almost be not a surprise, right? We've already talked about this 12 times at least over the course of the year, all the extra things that you've been doing, your specific goal of achieving this next higher level. We've already documented it. And really in this review period, we're just kind of sitting here acknowledging that we've already done this work. This is something that I actually pulled from Manager Tools in their career section. So want to give them full credit. But it's just a valuable framework to have. Your manager knows what you're trying to do. You've documented it together over the course of the year. When the review period comes, it's just an acknowledgement.
Sure. I actually think this is where the well-intended folks make their mistakes. Maybe we do track our performance, but I don't see a lot of people remembering to tie it to measurable things and tracking it with your manager on a semi-regular basis so that it's not just a one-time conversation and then 6 months later, what? We talked about that 6 months ago and you never brought it up again. So
Right.
that's really good, John. Good advice.
Yeah. I think that, this idea of like documenting and being able to back up your claims and say why you deserve things is terrific. I just think that, the added idea of doing it regularly and having regular check-ins so that you can say, well, here's the 12 meetings that we talked about it and what I said then and what your response was. Even if you have, I don't know, if you have a check-in form in those meetings, or if you just keep it in your notes so that you can at least, say, hey, this is when we talked about it. And then that person goes, oh yeah, that is when we talked about it. And yeah, that is the additional stuff that, I assigned to you. And yeah, we did have these discussions. That's right. And, it's just helps. Right. And then maybe if they haven't taken those things into account, coming into the review meeting or whatever your process is, then, they can feel justified in going back and saying, you know what, I made a mistake in reviewing Jane's performance over this past year. I had forgotten that I'd, had these these counseling and mentoring meetings where I said, hey, Jane, why don't you take on this additional responsibility? She immediately, accomplished those things, checked back in with me. We had those reviews and somehow just all of that slipped my mind. She reminded me that we had actually checked in, multiple times over the past year. And really, this was a mistake for me not to include it in my evaluation. So that's kind of, my thought on that. It's not just back it up like, once a year. It's, constant check-in. So let's move on to this fourth point, which is prepare answers to possible questions. And I think in my mind, it's difficult to debate with yourself, right? Well, why we don't think that you deserve it? Well, I think I do deserve it because of X, Y, Z. I mean, all of those, having pre-prepared things, again, going back to backing up your claims, having started out, your year or goal setting session with your manager, so it's a mutual process. I think that mitigates all of this, right? If you go into the period and they say, hey, we just don't see you as having deserved that, but that's at the end of a year-long process where you and your manager set out to, have like a career goals setting process. You were clear about what it is that you wanted to achieve. You were assigned tasks. You brainstormed together for additional things that you could do to justify, the bump in seniority or to go up in a pay grade or whatever it was, for you to achieve the goal. It was measurable. You measured it, you confirmed it together, and then at the end of the period, they say, "Oh, we don't think you deserved it." Well, now you're in a situation where, you know, either something's gone horribly wrong or you're being jerked around and it's a reason to leave the organization, right? If you set goals, clear goals, and had clear communication the entire time period, the year, and then at the very end they say, no, this none of this has anything to do with getting a raise or a promotion or whatever it is your goal was, then you have an indication that you work for an unhealthy company or one that has an unhealthy promotion process, which is a horrible red flag, right?
Run away. Run away.
Right. So again, if you've documented it, you have it ready, all the things that you've been asked to accomplish, the additional work that you took on, how it was measurable, the fact that you measured it, the fact that you checked back in with your manager, documenting when you checked back in and the feedback you got on it, and then you have it right, and it's all ready to go. And really, again, in your mind, and even leading into this meeting in the one-on-one, you can just say, hey, before we actually do this one-on-one, which is coming up in the next 3 weeks or whatever, I just wanted to go over the things that we've talked about over the last year, just so none of this is a surprise to me. This is my thinking. We had talked about goal setting, we had talked about documenting things. This is what the goals that I set, the additional things that we brainstormed for me to do, and how I accomplish them. Am I off base? Am I on base? So then there's no excuse for the manager, as to, previous points to say, oh, I just didn't remember, right? Like, so you have a pre-meeting meeting so that they're armed with writing that review about, all the things that you were asked to do, that you volunteered to do, how they were aligned with organizational goals, and the fact that you actually did them and got, positive feedback on those tasks. So then there's no excuse, right?
Absolutely.
I think one of the points that they make is, hey, there's no money in the budget for raises this year, or, nobody's, we haven't been able to do anything. I think one of the things that you need to be able to measure over the course of your task is money that you save the organization or additional revenue that occurred because of the things that you did. So if you can document those things and say, it feels odd that I was able to save the organization $100,000, but we don't, in our budget, don't have a raise of even $5,000 for me, or, I brought in $5 million of additional revenue, but there's no money in the budget for me to have a raise above, 1.5%. It's awkward for them to sit there and say that. And you don't want to have that response in the meeting. You want to have that response in the pre-meeting meeting, right? You wanted to be able to say things like, hey, this is the money savings that I brought to the organization. Here's the additional revenue that I brought into the organization because of the, this collaborative process that you and I went through for me to, achieve this higher level of seniority, higher level of compensation. I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page about that, right? And then when it's much, much harder for them to sit down and in that meeting and say, there's no money for raises, or, raises above this level. And again, if they do, that you're in a problematic situation. So,
And you've already documented all of the things you've done that are extra, so you pretty much written the edits to your resume already.
exactly. Right. So this documentation serves, double purpose, right? So you say, here's my baseline responsibilities in my job description. Here's the things that I've done above and beyond. Here's how they impacted the organization. Additional revenue brought in, cost savings that we achieved because of my project, risks reduced, quality of service increased, all measurable, right? And then if that's not a reason for you to get your raise, then it's a reason for you to get a great job at the next organization that recognizes what a great job you did, right? So, one of the things that I think that maybe we need to keep in mind, and hopefully, this is a reasonable transition, is one of the more important times to negotiate, your higher salary is when you're being hired, right? When you're negotiating like 3%, 5%, 15%, 20% raises above what you're making now, all of that is predicated upon the salary that you came into the organization at. So it goes to, it just makes sense that one of the more important salary negotiations you have is that entry salary when you're being hired into the organization. So that's our second topic, negotiating a starting salary. One of the resources that we used and that we're reacting to is another career blogs article from the Washington Post. So this is double career clickbait. How much starting salary negotiation is too much? And again, we will post the link to that article. They have a few pieces of advice here. First of all, respect the line. That is when they say, hey, this is kind of the max. You still need to respect that. Set a target range. Do your research, weigh salary against benefits, and do not anticipate a fixed number of negotiation rounds. So let's go over those one by one. Respect the line. Again, what that means is, at some point in time, they're going to say, listen, we really cannot offer you more than this amount of money. This is kind of our limit. So you need to respect that. Now, one of the things that you need to know is, the minimum that you need to make in order to take the job. We already noted earlier that, the most important salary, one of the more important salary negotiations you have is entering into the organization. So as a result, you need to understand and, respect when they say, this is our max. We would have to walk away if your requirements were above this number. But don't use that as a magic king's X, right? You want to be in a situation where if that number just doesn't make any sense, then you literally do walk away from the position because you can't afford to take that position at that number. So something to keep in mind there. I think it goes into the second point, set a target range. The point here is not that you need to set a target. The point is that your target should be a range of numbers. It's between this and this. This is the absolute minimum that I would need to take this job. Here's kind of the upper bounds of what I think is reasonable to be offered to do this job. It's my super hopeful number, right? I couldn't possibly do this job for less than $70,000 a year. It really would be terrific if I was making 98, something along those lines. So have that be a range, have it, make sense what that range is. And that kind of dovetails into the third point. Do your research. You need to, of course, do the research of what's typically made for this job, but you need to be able to talk about your experience, your education, success stories that you've had that are especially relevant to the position that would, bring something extra and special, which would make you, valuable at the higher end of your range as opposed to the lower end of your range. So, that being said, you also need to understand what that range is, right? Going into the job, you certainly don't want to lowball yourself. If the market rate is, at a job is, $100,000 to $120,000, really nice job. In most parts of the country, you certainly don't want to walk in saying, listen, I couldn't take it for less than 70, and it sure would be nice to make 95. If you just do a minimum amount of research in, using like glassdoor.com, maybe doing a little bit more reaching out to contacts you might have inside the company, examining cost of living in the area so you actually know what your minimum is. Like, what if you have to move to a location and the cost of living is much, much higher? I'm a Bay Area resident now. I used to live in Southern California. So, there's a big shock and change to the cost of living, and it's much higher. So that's relevant to me. All those things need to go into your research so that you have an idea of what the actual um, reasonable band of salary is. You should know probably the lower band of what they can offer you and what the upper band that they can offer you too. So, um, if you have that idea and you know what your range is, those two things really really go together.
I would argue to that point that you should probably have some kind of pay band or pay range discussion with the recruiter in those early interview conversations. And I remember one of the Geek Whisperers podcasts with Liz Bronson saying, "Hey, tell me what it is you want so I can tell you if I can actually get it for you." So if you need to give that range to the recruiter to see if it's a match for them to meet that range. And hopefully, that'll dispel some of the negotiating, but at least it would tell tell you and them, oh, okay, that's not a possibility at all,
Right.
and eliminate
And
some of the back and forth.
I would say that absolutely makes sense. You know, and maybe you can have an agreement with the recruiter. You can say, listen, um, would it be fair if you gave me the salary band for the position and I gave you my salary, requirements band so that we're both on the same page, right? And in that uh way we're having an open discussion about the possibilities. Like you know, um I'm probably going to give you a band of numbers, some of which are below your minimum and some of which are above your maximum. And you need to tell me like what's reasonable. Like I'll have an idea of what I think probably should be accomplishing at the maximum and what, I'd be accomplishing at the minimum. So, depending on, the ultimate job responsibilities, I'll probably want, be biased towards more or less, right? And you can say the same thing, right? Listen, for this upper part of the band, we would be expecting somebody who's already done the job with 3 or 4 years of experience to walk in the door and get it. um in this lower band, we're taking a risk with somebody who has less experience but could potentially do the job. So if you're having that open discussion, I mean, I really like what you're saying. Yeah. Have that discussion early, because listen, what if you are, you can't take the job for less a certain amount of money that there's no way that they could offer you that salary. Then why go through, a protracted discussion and dance and interviews and demonstrations and, public discussions, and then, suddenly at the end of the process find out that you're way too far apart for any of that work to have been done. Right? You want to get that out of the way early.
Absolutely. Don't waste people's time.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of that, John, since we're talking about the range here, do you find that most of the negotiating of the range is going to be with the recruiter, the hiring manager, or both of them near the end of the process? I feel like it's recruiter heavy at the beginning, but toward the end, I'm not sure there's a standard necessarily.
Yeah, I think there's two different situations that I can think of. One is if you are dealing directly with an organization, and maybe they have their internal recruiters who reach out to you. Um, in that situation, I think salary negotiations, again, I think map exactly to what you said earlier on. It's like a qualification process from the recruiter. They're looking for someone who actually does fit their range and their requirements. So if they have somebody that, you know, they like and they want to present, then, you know, they're qualifying you. And so early on, it's with that person. And then later on, as you get towards a real offer, it's probably going to be the hiring manager or, the recruiter as an agent of the hiring manager. You have like an informal discussion with the hiring manager and then the recruiter like makes the formal offer, something along those lines. Maybe it comes directly from the hiring manager. That's maybe less important. The other situation that I can think of is when there's a third party recruiting company, right? So that is the company doesn't have, either their internal people couldn't fill the position and they're going to an external company, or they don't have any internal expertise and they haven't built that up. They just, exclusively do their placement of, certain types of positions through outside companies, right? So in that situation, that recruiter is an agent, and it's almost like a real estate agent who's working both sides, right? Um, their interest is in placing somebody because they're making their money as some multiple of the first year's income of the person who's being placed. Either they make, two times your first year income, or one time your first year income, one and a half. I don't actually know that industry that well, so I'm not familiar with the multiple. So their interest is in placing somebody first and foremost. Second level of interest is for that person to be placed at the highest salary possible, because that, their multiple might be fixed, but now they're actually helping negotiate, the highest salary possible to maximize their compensation. So they're presenting somebody who's perfect for the job, who can make the upper levels of their pay band, and they make more money. So, at that same time, like, you don't know what that compensation, looks like for that person. So you don't want to just like come flat out and say, well, listen, the minimum that I would take is this much. But really what I'm hoping for what they described is here, because, maybe they're juggling like 15 different placements with this company. And, if they can just get one off the table and get paid on it, like, that's better than trying to maximize, spending, 2 extra weeks to maximize that pay. So something to keep in mind there. Always important to know with the various people and their incentives and whether or not they're aligned with you. That was a really long-winded answer. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's a great answer. Also, in the podcast I mentioned with Liz Bronson, I believe she talks about the different types of recruiters and how they get compensated, and that some of them may or may not tell you how they get compensated when you work with them.
Right.
But it'd be
Right.
fun if you knew. That would at
Yeah.
least tell you how it's going to work to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm not sure about how fair it is for you to ask. I would say that if you work with an independent recruiter, that is, that your relationship is with a recruiter over the medium to long term. That is, this person, you're thinking that you want to have a 5 to 10 year relationship with this recruiter. You want them to help you manage your career, every 4 or 5 years. If you are getting restless and, you've seen yourself top out at this organization, they're going to help you find another placement. Or if you're in the startup world and, startups are failing a lot and they know about a lot of different organizations for you to jump to. If, after 2 years this business is not working out, then, you need to have an intimate knowledge of their compensation structure, right? How they get compensated by the companies that they work with to place you at. That's very, very important.
Absolutely.
In that case, they're your agent, right? Not And theoretically, it's based on the relationship with you, not based on short-term relationships with other companies. So something to keep in mind. One thing that I did want to, oh yeah, so um, I would say this, especially as you get to, like, if you're negotiating towards the upper bounds of what the company can actually offer you. You want to be sensitive to this potential hiring manager's use of their political capital within the organization to get you compensated. If they have to go and use a bunch of political capital to get, to max out your compensation coming in, that has to be for a really good reason. Either you are, the perfect candidate, their dream candidate, that actually meets everything that was in the job description, even though the job description was for like 1 or 2 levels higher than they actually plan to compensate somebody for, and you meet that, and now we need to go and, you are perfect, you already have relationships with all the types of people that we need you, et cetera, et cetera. Don't, you shouldn't ask them to burn that political capital and goodwill within the organization for you unless there's a really good reason to max out. It shouldn't just be about ego, right? It should be about your requirements and your needs in this specific case. Um, if it makes, if, okay, so I have a personal anecdote here. Um, I think when I came to this company, they had advertised like a systems engineer position. And I think that they just didn't have the budget to have a senior systems engineer. So, whatever the salary band was for that, like it just didn't make sense for me to take the position. Right. And I said, I'd actually be taking a pay cut in order to join the organization. And so, I think the hiring manager had to go to his director and say, listen, John's right. It doesn't make sense. Like we're never going to get anybody here unless, we up what, he's asking, what we're offering. And so, I didn't make him go back twice or three times. I said, here's, honestly, like here's my W-2, here's what I made, here's what the cost of living difference is. You're just, it doesn't make sense for me to take this job. And candidly, I don't think that you're going to be able to find anybody to take the job if this is what you're offering. And, so in order for him to go to his boss and get more money, like he was using up some political capital and goodwill to have that discussion. So I just don't think that it makes sense to do that for ego. It has to be driven by something specific, right? You don't want them to think of you as having, oh, that's the person who I have to burn like goodwill with my, all the relationships that I have within the organization in order to get them compensated every single time. I mean, you also don't want to have like suck up like all the raise budget that they have planned for this year too. So like maybe you're coming in at this amount of money, but you're not going to get a raise for 2 years or 3 years. You don't want to be in that position either. So a couple different things to think about there. You really, it's a delicate balance, and you have to understand what's going on within the organization and, really understand what your needs are going in. So got sidetracked there a little bit. Fourth point, weigh salary against benefits. Know what the benefits are of the organization. Like maybe they can't offer you more salary, but maybe there are things that you could negotiate outside of salary if that's where they're at. They're like, oof, we just don't have more budget for this. But maybe there's things that you could negotiate. For example, maybe most first year employees get, 3 weeks of vacation, and then you get added, every year that you work there, you get another week of vacation. Well, you maybe they could offer you 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks of vacation, as you're coming in because of your seniority and the fact that they couldn't offer you more money. Is that something that's attractive to you, right? Because if you're not going to use that vacation, actually, then, it's just more money. So something to think about and weigh your costs and what your requirements are. Maybe they have a lower cost, higher quality healthcare plan than you currently have, which means that you are going to get an effective raise because of the drop in your costs of healthcare going to the organization. So that might change your compensation and requirements, right? Oh, I'm actually, going to be, my out-of-pocket healthcare costs are going to be lower because of this amazing plan that they have negotiated. There's another thing. What if you're actually moving to a lower cost of living location for the job, right? Rather than a higher cost of living location. It's that magical thing that happens to people that I've never heard of. Then you're getting an effective pay raise, right? But because you're getting money, and maybe your housing costs or food costs or transportation costs are going down, so you're effectively getting more compensation. Last point here: do not anticipate a fixed number of rounds. So that's like the negotiation rounds. typically you might think about it as being like a used car, like a negotiation where they give you like a low ball price and you give them a high ball price, and then over a certain number of rounds, you come to an equilibrium. Like if you have done your research, um, you think that you're justified in asking for a higher end part of the salary band, and they just agree with you. That's it, right? So it's like, listen, like we've all talked about it. Like your bands are 85 to $95,000. I think that I'm worth a $95,000 because of this specific experience. And they say, it's difficult. We were hoping to come in a little bit below that, but we think that you're right, and we agree with you. Okay, that's the end of it, right? You asked for the higher end, and you got it. And that doesn't mean that you deserved more. It doesn't mean that they were actually able to offer more, right? You all kind of started from a position where you were open about salary bands, you were open about your bands of expectation, and you came together. You made a pitch, and they accepted it. That doesn't mean that you got cheated. It means that they're paying you the upper end of what they were expecting to pay, but for good reason, right? It doesn't mean that they should come back to you and say, well, what about 92? And then you say, no, I'm firm on 95. And they say, well, what about 93? And you say, no, I'm firm. And then they give in. Like, is that better? No. Like, you asked for it and you got it. So don't presume, like, um, that the negotiation has to happen like that, right? And don't presume if they make you an offer that it's a lowball offer, right? Maybe if they come and kind of your bands, your understanding of the bands was like 85 to 95, and you made a pitch for 95, and they say, hey, we appreciate it, and maybe there's something that you don't know, which is, we're moving you to a lower cost of living area. We don't know if you're aware of that, but we actually think that you're so valuable that we don't want to compete with anybody else. We think that you're in a high demand position. We want to offer you 98, or we want to offer you 95, and we want to give you a $5,000 signing bonus, right? That doesn't mean that offer was a lowball offer, right? That doesn't mean that they would have gone to 105, right? Sometimes they just, people recognize quality people. Hopefully you've done the work that we've talked about to, in the past, to demonstrate that you're a person of value, documented all those things. You have a great resume. It can happen like that. Don't think that it can't. So don't.
Sure. Sorry, I cut you off there. Now, how many times have you had to negotiate for a salary, John, if you don't mind me asking? Because I've known people who haven't ever had to do it because every time they made a move, the pay bump was substantial enough for it to be for there to be no need to negotiate.
Every time. I've never taken a job without asking for more money. And that's the last three jobs, say.
You mean more than their first offer?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
The first
Gotcha.
offer with X, I asked for, X plus, 15 to 18% for good reasons, right? And, every time, I had good reasons, here's what you offered. Here's why I think that I'm worth more. It's because of X, Y, Z. And then I follow through, right? Because they're kind of taking a flyer. You don't actually work for them. They haven't actually seen you do the job, over anything except like the most cursory, ability for them to watch you do the job, unless you've done things like, you know, um, there's a lot of video on you doing the job that happens to be, on YouTube or social media or wherever. That's just about the only time that they're going to actually see you do the job, unless you do a demo of, or a dry run or a mock version of the job, right? So um, I ask for more, I justify it, and then I follow through and make them think, oh wow, we should have paid him more.
That's awesome. Good for you.
And they have a chance to pay me more later, right? So,
Opportunity on both sides.
right, right. All right. Anything on this topic before we close out?
If you're out there looking for that next raise, maybe you need a mentor. And if you haven't found that mentor, there's no reason to wait any longer. Send that tweet out to @NerdJourney. Take advantage of the John White School of Mentoring today and learn from John's expert negotiation skills on how you can get that next raise, pricing and packaging to come.
Man, wouldn't it be great if I had a business that I got actually some percentage of somebody's raise if I help them?
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I guess depending on the size of the raise, right?
I'm willing to give you a cut of the proceeds.
Oh my goodness. I don't know exactly what that job would be. I guess agent, right? Hollywood agent.
That's right. You're the agent. Agent
Yeah.
White.
Yeah. So upon further review, I actually don't want that job. So no, thank you. Oh my goodness. Well, I think that's it for that segment and all the topics we had planned. Anything else pop in your mind before we just close out completely?
No, sir. Just a reminder that we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney.
All right. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as that journey continues. I'm John White @VJourneyman for Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.
Episode number 28. We're going to be talking
About stuff. This is where you say we're going to be talking about news opinions based on our point of view. Sorry, I haven't done that part before. Excuse me.
All right. Take two.